Okay, here we are on episode 2 of the Schaefer Files. So today we are going to discuss background checks. What is in a background check? What is a background check? What is not a background check? And the various work that comes into it. So the first thing that most people think of when they think of a background check is generally truthfinders.com. You run somebody's name, you pay $20, you get this database report with a bunch of information in there. I hate to break it to you, but that's not a background check. In fact, that's not even the beginning of a background check. So, first of all, there are differences between what you receive in a public database and what is available in a private restricted database that is accessible by law enforcement, attorneys, insurance professionals, and private investigators, or even process servers. First thing you need to be aware of is even though certain people may have access to the databases and have the knowledge on how to work or perform the work for a background check, that doesn't necessarily make it legal. For instance, an insurance adjuster can run a database report and conduct a background check while investigating claims. But an insurance adjuster cannot perform a background check just to perform a background check. In most states in the union, that is a violation of the law, including Texas. A police officer can access those databases to run background checks while working criminal investigations. However, a police officer cannot perform a background check for the general public and cannot access computer data or police department databases for the purposes of conducting a background check for any purpose other than working an active criminal case. Process servers, same thing. They can conduct certain research work and skip tracing, which is part of a background check, for the purposes of effecting lawful service of process for which they have documents in hand or know for a fact the documents are forthcoming. They cannot provide it to the general public. Your neighbor down the road may have access to truthfinders.com or publicdata.com and know how to research certain things without a problem. However, if your neighbor down the road does so for you rather than his or her own curiosity or for his or her own specific purpose, that neighbor is violating the law in most states, including Texas. Furthermore, that's not necessarily, as previously mentioned, a true background check. So what is a database report? A database report is a bunch of information provided as a starting point. Prior to public data or private database access, a background check was extremely time consuming, even more so than it is now. A background check could cost anywhere from $500 to close to $2,000. Now you fast forward 20, 30, 40 years down the road and account for inflation, and now you have a background check that could easily cost tens of thousands of dollars if there were no database access. With database access, an investigator has a starting point in most cases. We can review the information, but here is the most important piece. A private investigator who is conducting a true background check investigation must verify every piece of information that is obtained in that database report. Of equal importance, that private investigator may not be able to release everything that is in that database report. Case in point, if I am working as an investigator on a case for a licensed attorney, I can supply my background result on my company's letterhead, essentially what a report is, and I can supply the database report with all the information. The same thing if I am conducting a fraud investigation for an insurance claims adjuster. However, if I am conducting a background check for an individual that does not have a professional license and is just wanting a background check conducted, I cannot and I will not include my database report because there's certain information that that individual is just not entitled to, such as full dates of birth in most cases, and definitely not entitled to full social security numbers. Now, when conducting the background check, as I've already stated, anything that is discovered in the database must be confirmed, must be verified. That means you have to go to the local sources, and that can take time. That's why a true background check, while a basic one can cost anywhere from $100 to $250, a true background check, more often than not, still costs $500 to $600. Why? Because again, it takes time to do that research. Even if you can get onto a computer and type certain pieces of information in, that still takes time, even if it yields no confirming information. It takes time. If it's a red flag from the database and there's nothing at that local level for that particular county or city, it takes time to try to figure out why. And there has to be a plausible reason as to why. A true professional investigator must be able to explain it in some manner, even if it is a speculation, a glorified, educated guess. It must be explainable. If I see a red flag on Dallas County and I go to check with Dallas County and I see nothing, I need to be able to pick up the phone with the Dallas County District Clerk's office or the county clerk's office, talk to them, give them my investigator's credentials so they know they can release certain information, and try to find out what the issue is. That is part of a background check. Checking areas that may not have red flagged, but are nonetheless close to an area where your subject used to live, must be checked. That is part of a background check. Verifying information such as an exact conviction must be verified. I cannot tell you how many times I've seen on a background check that somebody was originally charged with a felony, only to have the case pled down to a misdemeanor, but it still shows as a felony conviction on the database, and they are not convicted felons. And it happens all the time for a variety of reasons, a variety of valid reasons, such as there was enough evidence for an indictment. However, upon review of the evidence or further review of the evidence at hand, plus any exculpatory evidence discovered or uncovered by a defense investigator and counsel, it was clear that that case, while maybe it couldn't be dismissed, maybe it did not lead to a not guilty verdict at trial, it led to a plea agreement of a lesser charge or a conviction to a lesser and included charge, which could very easily take somebody from being a convicted felon to someone that is just convicted of a misdemeanor. Still, criminal conviction, but nowhere near as bad as being a convicted felon. This is why a proper background check must be conducted by a licensed professional who knows what they're doing. This is also why it is important for whoever is conducting a background check to know how to conduct it properly, know the ins and outs of the legal system, and be able to explain why certain things happen a certain way. There are numerous cases where an individual is charged with a crime. There are numerous cases where that individual is given such a sweet deal that they go ahead and they plead guilty, even though he or she is not guilty, at least in their mind. Sometimes it's a matter of you can spend all this money here, or we can go on ahead and plea this out for time served. And if it does not affect your overall livelihood and lifestyle, then they go ahead and plea it out. There's also such thing as a conditional dismissal, whereby even though you were quote unquote pleading guilty or not entering a plea, case is dismissed provided that you perform certain tasks. There again, if something pops up on a database report, but the individual was eligible for an order of non-disclosure, that needs to be explained as well. This item showed up on the database report. However, it appears they may have obtained an order of non-disclosure. One important note, if it was in fact an order of non-disclosure, then it should not have been on the database report. And therefore, it should not be used as something to go against the individual in question. Background checks are far more complex than actually typing something into truthfinders.com or some other database, hitting enter, and look at all this information. I can't say the most, one benefit of hiring a professional is that that professional knows how to read that material. Case in point, you run a background check on an individual, and on that database report, and see, even I say it's a background check, but you run the database report, and you look at that report and you see multiple addresses. The reality is, when you look at those addresses, you have to look down at the dates, and you'll notice that those dates overlap. Why? Because a variety of pieces of information go into those dates. There's credit header information, which is public record without falling under the umbrella of the Fair Credit Reporting Act. There's utility bill information. There's billing information with the Texas Department of Public Safety or another state's variation of that Department of Motor Vehicles, where you have your vehicle registered, etc. And that information can pop up on a report. It's not uncommon for an individual to have mail sent to the previous address, even though they've gotten through every single record that they can think of, filed their change of address, and reported that change of address to the U.S. Postal Service. Mail still gets sent there by mistake. The key thing about hiring a professional, and this is part of what constitutes a true background check, is knowing how to read those reports. A professional is going to look at those dates, see where they overlap, see how far back one date goes, and say, okay, you know what? This might be an address where our subject could be found. Maybe I can follow up with that. But more than likely, based on the fact that it goes all the way back to 1989, and that's the same address that his parents had, if his parents are still alive, that's probably their parents' address. But I'll go ahead and follow up with it. This other address goes back to 2009 and supposedly comes all the way up to December of 2021. However, I have another address that starts at December of 2019 and comes all the way through November of 2022. I'm going to bet that address is probably the better address. I could be wrong though, so I'm going to verify both of these addresses with local public records and see if I can determine who owns them. If need be, I'm going to drive to the county clerk's office in question if I can't access their records online, and I'm going to verify with records. There are certain records that you can verify in person with a private investigator's license that are not subject to open records otherwise. You have to have a permissible purpose. You cannot obtain an individual's driving record unless you have a permissible purpose. You are not supposed to be able to obtain an individual's license plate registration information without a permissible purpose. Both of those are covered under the Driver's Privacy Protection Act, DPPA. Certain other information closely related to credit and other background information is covered under the Gramm-Leach-Bliley Act, particularly anything that might indicate banking or credit card information, which is why, again, you need a licensed professional to conduct your background check. And part of that is what constitutes a background check. A background check, as already stated, is more than simple database information. Now, why do we conduct background checks on individuals? Well, that can be for a variety of reasons. It can be because you're interested in engaging in a business relationship with that individual that requires you to give that individual a lot of money. It can be a situation where you're checking up on your son or daughter's love interest or your own potential love interest. Or it can be a neighbor that has caused a problem and you've had to seek a restraining order and you want to know how dangerous they are. For instances in insurance adjusting and claims, you want to know if there's other information back out there. You want to know if they've been charged with insurance fraud before. Or are they currently engaged in a lawsuit with regards to an automobile accident or other injury? In the world of criminal defense, you want to know if there are any crimes of moral turpitude that you can use to impeach the individual before he or she gets on the stand. It is also a good idea to conduct background checks on individuals that you intend to hire for employment or for the purpose of performing services for your company. In fact, in some instances, it is required. In the state of Texas, private investigations companies are required to conduct their own background checks on potential employees, even though the state does a background check of its own with fingerprint searching. There are plenty of other industries where there are requirements for background checks as part of their compliance. Certain contracts or professional contracts with clients also require it, even if the industry itself does not. So today we went over a host of why you get a background check, or some of the reasons, and what truly constitutes a background check. If you decide you need one, feel free to give us a call, 214-785-4504, or you can email me directly at dave@preferredintelligence.com. By the way, we are licensed in the state of Texas, license number A19452, and we will be happy to consult with your situation or consult with you about your situation and determine the best avenue and whether we can provide a background check for you. Thank you.